Good evening. This is the second lecture in a series of many to follow on Ibn Arabi. In the first lecture, I put Ibn Arabi in perspective by discussing basically the history of modern Western philosophy. In this lecture, I will connect one part of Ibn Arabi's philosophy, his thoughts with regard to time, in a broader context, but this will only be a beginning, even thinking about time in Ibn Arabi's cosmological thought. Let me first mention that Ibn Arabi himself and people who are following the spirit of Ibn Arabi and are knowledgeable and take the time and trouble to study him in detail, all follow Ibn Arabi in this, in making a distinction between what was called falsafa or philosophy and what I will call mystical insight. Ibn Arabi, when he was still very young, had this direct experience, an opening, al-futuhat, with respect to the divine. And that put him in a different frame of mind, to say the least, and made him realize that there was much beyond the ordinary kind of philosophical propositional discourse. And yet, one of the real distinctive aspects of Ibn Arabi's thought, it seems to me, is that he was quite good at propositional thinking as well, and he was at the same time very good at pursuing poetic and musical metaphors. His magnum opus, which is the Meccan opening, Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, is full of lyrical passages, full of pregnant metaphors and deep speculations. But everything in Ibn Arabi is informed by this experience of direct encounter with the divine. So this is something we have to realize. I discovered that, especially with respect to time and cosmology, Mohamed Haj Yousef, who teaches in United Arab Emirates and is trained in modern science, engineering and physics, has written a really great book, Ibn Arabi, Time and Cosmology. So I want to spend basically a few minutes today introducing that book and some of the thoughts and some of my beginnings of some of my interpretations with respect to the connection between Ibn Arabi's thoughts in time and some of the research in the frontiers of cosmology and what people will call quantum gravity, including string theory and loop quantum gravity today. What Professor Yousef does is to discuss in great detail both the background of Ibn Arabi's realization of time in connection with reality, which is haq in Ibn Arabi's terminology, and also the problems that we find in modern philosophy about time and space, both. In my last lecture, I talked about Bergson and his resolution of Zeno's paradoxes and his thoughts on time and creative evolution. Ibn Arabi took an approach that was similar but also informed by this intuition that I mentioned in my last lecture. Bergson got quite close to. It's not clear, however, from reading Bergson's essays and about his life, that he had the kind of direct encounter, the kind of intuition that it seems he would like to have had as Ibn Arabi had early on in his life. But clearly, when we try to think of time in terms of space, as Bergson warned us, and not in terms of duration, we get into many paradoxes and puzzles, as Zeno had pointed out. But how do we get beyond a conception of time that is psychological and subjective? Deleuze, in his book on Bergson, actually claimed that Bergson went to an ontological conception of time, and some other interpreters of Bergson dispute this, and they would rather have Bergson confined to a phenomenological type of description of time. So that's an area of controversy that I don't want to get into this evening. But pointing to Ibn Arabi, Professor Yousef has discovered, in terms of interpretation, a number of important things. And so let me read from his translations of Ibn Arabi, where he explains how Ibn Arabi's conception of time is connected with Ibn Arabi's conception of oneness of being. Ibn Arabi says, so the possible, that is contingent existence, became manifest between light and darkness, nature and spirit, the unseen and the visible, and the veiled and unveiled. Therefore, that which is close to absolute existence, from among all that contingent realm we have mentioned, is light and spirit. And all of what we have mentioned, which is close to absolute non-existence, is shadow and body. And from the totality of those different kinds of contingent existent, from form, which the Arabic word for form is surah, comes to be. So when you consider the world from the side of the breath of the All-Merciful, very important concept, you say, it is nothing but Allah. But when you consider the world with regard to its being equally balanced and well-proportioned between existence and non-existence, then you say these are creations, in Arabic, makhlukat. So, in the famous Quranic expression of this fundamental ontological reality, addressed to the Prophet, you, that is Muhammad, did not throw, inasmuch as you are a creation, so that it is God who was really acting. When you did throw, inasmuch as you are real, that is haq, but Allah threw, because He is the real, in Arabic, al-haq. For it is through the divine creative breath that the whole world is breathing, animated with life, and the breath made it appear. So this creative divine breath is inner dimension, batin, for the real, and the manifest dimension, zahir, for creation. Thus, the inner dimension of the real is the manifest dimension for creation, and the inner dimension of creation is the manifest aspect of the real. And through their combination, the generated existence, al-kawn, is actualized. Since without that combination, it would only be said to be real and creation. Thus, the real is for the absolute existence, and creation is for the absolutely possible. So, what becomes non-existent of the world and its form that disappears is through what is close to the side of non-existence, and what remains of it and does not allow for non-existence is through what is close to the side of existence. Hence, these two things, existence and non-existence, are continually ruling over the world. So the creation is always new with every breath, both in this world and in the hereafter. Therefore, the breath of the All-Merciful is continually directed toward the act of creation. And nature is continually taking on existence as the forms for this breath, so that the divine command does not become inactive, because inactivity is not appropriate for it. So, constantly forms are newly appearing and becoming manifest, according to their states of readiness to accept the divine creative breath. And this is the clearest possible description of the divine origination, ibda, of the world. And Allah says the truth, and He shows the way. And Professor Yousef summarizes helpfully for us. To summarize, therefore, this expression implies that the world can be conceived symbolically as a mixture of light and darkness. For Ibn Arabi, this darkness is quite literally nothing. It is simply the absence of light. Light, on the other hand, is ultimately the real, via the divine name, the light, al-Nur. And the real is one. So all existence is in essence one. Multiplicity appears through creation as a result of mixing the oneness of light with the darkness of non-existence. In other words, we can say, since darkness is nothing, that the creation is the constantly repeating relative appearance or manifestation of the real. The real manifests most perfectly in the perfect human being and relatively in other creatures. And these manifestations happen through the universal intellect. So, in real existence, there is only the real, who is Allah, and this universal intellect, who is the messenger of Allah. So there is in fact no ontologically self-subsistent evil, since the creation is all good, an aspect of this cosmological conception which, taken out of context, could easily give rise to obvious religious and ethical objections. Hence, what we perceive as evil is in reality the absence of good, just as darkness is the absence of light. Thus, this is the basic principle. But in order to understand it, we need to explain how the mixing between light and darkness is done, which is again to say, how is the world created? So it does get us back into cosmological conception, but this principle of ever-renewed creation, we might call continuous creation, is one that actually helps us think through the puzzles of time as well. I don't have time to go into this in detail. Professor Yousef actually makes an analogy between the superstring theory and the science of letter. Let me give just a slight background and point to another direction that could be equally fruitful that we should explore. In the briefest possible terms, analytically we can sum up the general theory of relativity in terms of Einstein-Hilbert action equation. It has, on the right-hand side, two terms, two integrals. One integral covers the region which we can call symbolically M of the space-time manifold. And the second integral is defined on the boundary of M. Remember that a manifold is something that is locally Euclidean, but in theory of gravitation, the general theory of relativity, we have actually non-Euclidean geometry of space-time on this manifold. So the second integral on the boundary is assumed to be space-like, and it includes a determinant, small h, of the three-dimensional metric on the boundary. And there is the trace of the second fundamental form. There is also an energy-momentum tensor in the theory of general relativity, and then we can sum up these two terms, and we can derive the Einstein field equations from them using both the Riemann tensor and the Ricci tensor. And a natural generalization of relativity is the Einstein-Cartan theory. And Einstein-Cartan theory proceeds by introducing potentials connected with translations and Lorentz transformations. Very generously, Poincaré, the great French mathematician, called them Lorentz transformation, although he worked out the mathematics of this. The corresponding gravitational field and the strengths of that field, that is, are torsion and curvature. And it's the curvature that is related to the non-Euclidean geometry. It is straightforward, actually, to formulate extensions with a propagating torsion by gauging the translations and the Lorentz transformations, leading to the what should be accurately called Poincaré gauge theory. The torsion is close to zero in terms of macroscopic dimensions, but at the electronic Compton wavelengths and in the early universe, torsion, which is a consequence of spin currents, should be strong. And in fact, we know experimentally that it is quite strong. And this Einstein-Cartan theory is naturally embedded in theories of supergravity, where spin minus 3/2 particle, the gravitino, plays a central role. Now we know that at Planck length, the general theory of relativity does break down. The question is about the geometry of space-time at that level, and one possible solution is that we do have a discrete space rather than a continuum at that length, which is also very shortly after the Big Bang. And the question here, from the point of view of time, is how do we really characterize time itself at that time, because the ordinary idea of space-time is facing a breakdown here, and we cannot avoid what are called mathematically singularities as well. So it is a big puzzle, and string theory could be one solution, loop quantum gravity could be another solution, and each in its turn will have cosmological as well as ontological significance. So more serious thinking about time that would integrate insights of Ibn Arabi and people like him with insights of the most advanced up-to-date physics will be a very fruitful area of research in the future. Thank you.